Welcome to this week's episode of The Happy Psychic, and I am joined this week by Claire Campagna. Hi, Claire.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for coming. So, Claire, you are you class yourself or you call yourself a soul-centered mentor, and your mission is to help people connect with themselves more deeply so they can align with their soul's gift and their wisdom and their desires. But can you tell us a little bit more about actually how you got to this point, first of all, of doing this sort of work?
For sure. So it is a very different title than I've gone by for for many years. So actually, right now when we're recording this, it's the middle of August, and the last day of July was my last day in the corporate world after 7 years. Um,
Yay!
yes, I know. So amazing. Um, Definitely still adjusting. It feels like very surreal still at this point. But I say that to say, what a stretch, what a jump from where I was. I literally got a degree in packaging engineering from college. I went and did exactly that, like a very technical sales role for 7 years in the corporate world. And I give that backstory because I wasn't bad at what I was doing. I was actually pretty okay at what I was doing. I was doing a good job. I experienced success pretty early in my career. And I was like, okay, I've done everything I was supposed to do. Why am I still feeling this lack? Why am I still not feeling fulfilled? I've literally hit peak achievement at my company already. And that was what propelled me on this journey of finding my soul, reconnecting with my soul and myself, not just this conditioned version of myself that, everybody told me I was, or that I was starting to identify with very strongly. And, obviously that opens a ton of cans of worms when you go down that journey. And it was a roller coaster for sure, but a beautiful one. And I really just, the further I got down that process with myself, the more that I knew I really wanted to help in that same way. And so typically I tend to work with young professionals as well who are experiencing success in all societal terms of that word, but they're still feeling that disconnection from themselves. So I help them, I take them through a similar process that I went through to really find themselves on a soul level and actually enjoy their lives and not just like go through it on autopilot.
Yeah, it's so funny because there's nothing wrong with the corporate world. Like, you know, I always encourage people to like follow their dreams, but there's nothing wrong with staying in corporate if that's where you want to be. But
Fully agree. Yeah.
also, it's so hard, I think, for people to really work up the courage to take that step away whenever that's all they've known their whole lives. So, whether it's been 7 years like yourself or 27 years for somebody else, it's still a big change to step away from that and to follow something that is more holistic, that is more spiritual, that is more fulfilling, really, to
Mhm.
you. Like what sort of made you reach the point where you thought, yes, it's definitely time? Was there like a light bulb moment or?
Kind of. I mean, so I would say there wasn't necessarily a specific situation that pushed me to that point. I spent literally about a year, almost a year and a half, just being very annoyed with my situation. Like I stayed in that denial, frustration. How did I, victim mode? How did I end up in this situation stage for a really long time? And the way that I kind of describe it is one day I literally had sat in that state for so long that I woke up and was like, I don't care how scary it is and uncomfortable I'm probably going to be to try to follow my heart and try to chase after what I want, because where I'm at right now is so uncomfortable that I don't want to stay here. So really, like, basically the discomfort of where I was at just grew greater than my fear of
Yeah.
trying something. And for me, it took it took a year of being pissed off for me to hit that point. So basically what I try to do with my clients is help them to not have to take that long being
Yeah.
being pissed off first before they just start. I didn't even know where to start. And I think that was the biggest thing for me, but it took that amount of time for me to even start asking myself questions and taking action instead of just consuming information. I think that's like the really easy, quote unquote, easy thing to do is just read the books, listen to the podcasts. And that was super helpful. But I needed to really take action and start doing things towards where I wanted to go to see some change in my life.
Yeah, it's still a very brave move. Like no matter how long you sat in that mode for, like it is an incredibly brave move, I think, to step out and branch out and finally just be authentic. And in some ways, like I know from my personal experience, I found that it was like a weight lifted off my shoulder whenever I
Yes.
finally made the decision to make that transition. And I didn't really know what was ahead of me. I thought corporate seemed to be quite predictable, but obviously on this new sort of path, this spiritual path, I didn't really know what was ahead of me. Weird being a psychic, but spirit will only give you so much information. The thing is, we're not supposed to know. We're not supposed to have all of the answers, and we are just supposed to follow where our heart is being drawn. And I think that that's where a lot of people go wrong because they start to think, well, no, I this is what I do. I know I'm unhappy, but we're not supposed to be happy in our jobs. I'm not supposed to be fulfilled in life. I've got a wife, a husband, children, whatever it might be, a mortgage, car payments, so I need to just keep going, keep going. But there's only so long that the universe will allow you to keep going for before they'll start to pull the rug from under your feet to try and shake things up a bit to get you back on the right path.
Totally. I fully agree with everything you just said. And that was for me, I agree. I think the corporate world is for some people. I think you can find your purpose and fulfillment there. For me personally, that was not a part of my journey. I had known before this whole situation happened to me that this wasn't right, but I was ignoring it. And yeah, it took realizing, okay, that means I have to figure out something else. And that doesn't mean I need to know all the details, but for me, it was totally leaning into following my heart. And that was a reframe of, you can do all the ways of reflecting and being like, I need to pay my bills. I'm looking back and I was making X amount of money. That's what I need to recreate. For me, it was, I'm looking back and seeing that I'm a person that's not going to let myself fail, quote unquote fail. I'm not going to let myself fall on my face. I'll redirect if I need to. And that was a little brain reframe I had to do to trust myself and know that you don't have to know what lies ahead exactly, but I know that if I'm taking steps towards where I want to go and aligned steps, if you will, it's going to take me where I need to be at the end of the
Yeah.
day.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one of the things I think that is the hardest to trust in. I certainly found it the hardest, like one of the hardest things to trust in, that actually I would be taken care of regardless. And I can remember another medium saying to me that, I didn't need to worry about finances or anything like that, that she was being told that I was going to be taken care of and I was always going to have enough money in my purse. And even then, when you're being told that, it's still I don't know. I still felt like, well, I need to see evidence. I need to just have the evidence of that first before I'm going to just, put my full trust in you. But eventually I relinquished control. And actually from I guess given the additional insight that I would get as a psychic medium, it still doesn't make it easy always to relinquish control. But I think that once you have that knowledge that actually everything serves a purpose, and you believe that even the hard times that come along, there is a purpose in them, and it might be to redirect you in a certain direction. It could be for any reason, really, but there's always a purpose or a lesson to learn, or, something like that. And if you just trust, keep optimistic, you will start to manifest like your future coming in and the positive things coming in, and you'll be taken care of. Everything will be fine.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's how I feel as well. And it's definitely easier said than done to
Yeah.
embody that. But
And it's even harder to teach it to somebody else.
yes. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think it's one of those things where it's like you just have to release control, like you said. It's realizing that you are your biggest block. You're creating the resistance when you do try to like hold the reins too tight. And sometimes you just need an experience that kind of smacks you in the face a little bit to remind you of that every now and then. But I totally agree that when you can look at those situations and realize there's always something that you can learn from it, it doesn't necessarily make it easier, but it does allow you to kind of have that relief, like you were talking about. Like you have that faith, you have that trust. You're like, I know that I don't know how, but I know it's going to work out. And this sucks right now, but I'm going to see what I can get from it and keep moving.
Yeah. And now you're really interested in astrology as well.
Yes, I
Yeah.
am.
So have you always been interested in astrology, or is that something new that came about when you were on this path?
Yeah, definitely on this path. I would say honestly, I was like the naysayer of astrology prior. Like I was like, okay, this is kind of stupid. I've always been pretty open-minded and like definitely have believed in spirits and connection to the other side and extraterrestrial life and things like that. But astrology, for some reason, I was just like, that's just dumb. And then, fast forward to COVID, we're all stuck in our houses and I had nothing else to do but dive into the human psyche. So I basically got every single person's information that I ever met, and was just taught myself. Like I spent pretty much the whole first year of COVID, that year that I was angry. I did a lot of soul searching on myself and on my friends, and I definitely do not call myself an astrologer. I haven't gone down all the holes and like learned everything perfectly, but I would be lying if I said it didn't come naturally to me to read the charts and to like kind of understand the interpretations. And so I do incorporate that in my offerings with my clients, because for me, it was so profound to just use it as a tool of, like a compass almost, and validation as well. Like, okay, like I know and very much resonate with what this is telling me, that this is how I am when I'm really aligned and I'm on my, quote unquote highest path. And this is where I can go when I am kind of feeling that resistance and living really out of alignment. And for me, that was just hugely helpful. And it was kind of one of those things where it's like, how does it know this about me? Nobody knows this about me. And human design as well. I incorporate that too, if you're familiar with that.
Well,
And
tell us a little bit about human design. What's that involve?
yeah, so same thing. I don't claim to be just a human design specialist or anything, but it is based on astrology, the chakra system, I Ching, Kabbalah. It's basically all of these ancient systems that one day were channeled to this man named Ra. And long story short, it uses the basis of all of those to basically say, hey, this is how your personality was designed in this lifetime. And there's a bunch of different nuances to it. Like it is a deep, deep rabbit hole if you want to go down that one. But to me, I think the difference between human design and astrology is kind of, it's a blueprint of who you are. Whereas human design is really giving you kind of tangible information on this is how your energetics actually work with other people or don't work so well with other people. And it's understanding, hey, you are a person who should go to bed before you're exhausted. Or you probably aren't meant to work in a typical 9 to 5, because you're actually best when your creative genius can be channeled within a 3 hour window or whatever it is. And there's obviously way more to it than that. But I feel like there's more kind of tangible takeaways in terms of how you can integrate what you learn into your life from human
Yeah.
design versus
Yeah.
astrology.
That's super interesting. It's something that I haven't I'm a Reiki practitioner. So I
Mhm.
know, well, I'm a Reiki master, so I'm familiar with like chakras, and I know a little about Kabbalah from when I was doing tarot. So I've probably touched on some of them as individuals,
Mhm.
but not in the way that you're talking about with human design. And it's the same with astrology. I was always like, as a child, I always would have read my star sign. I was
Yeah.
interested in that, but I think that people think, oh, that's astrology, but actually astrology is so much more.
So much more.
Um, but it's something that I've never really gotten into properly. I think it's probably not my thing necessarily, or maybe
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
just that I'm maybe not supposed to hit on it right now. I always think that we're always drawn to the things at the right time that are going to help us propel. But I did remember reading a book a while ago, and they talked about the how in like biblical times, for example, they would have used the astrology charts, as compatibility between two people. So if two people wanted to get married, it was like, okay, well, let's look at your charts, and then that was the deciding factor on whether this marriage could like go ahead. And I think that it might still be used in parts of the world like that as well, but I just thought, well, that's like pretty powerful, really, that it can have so much say over who we are as a person and actually be accurate.
Yeah. It's pretty wild. And I think it's recognizing that it's this weird paradox of, yes, it's written in the stars, and it is, a lot of it is, I hate to use the word definitive, but it is, it is what it is type
Yeah.
of thing. And a lot of it is also up to you. There is still free will involved. It's not saying because you have this placement, you are this. It's saying you have the potential to go in these directions, basically. And that's
Mm-hmm.
why understanding the whole chart is so much more powerful than just knowing your star sign. It's
Mm.
so much deeper than that. And really, that was what drew me in, like my own personal experience, because I won't get too into it, but basically, I have a ton of planets in the most detached, like analytical versus emotional sign there is, Aquarius. Like I identified with that very strongly because that's also my sun sign, um, for my whole life. And then come to find out, I have my moon sign, so another huge piece of me, as well as several other placements in Pisces, which is like the biggest feeler, the most emotional, the most compassionate sign of the zodiac. And I feel like I had this moment where I was like, I feel seen. Like I've been blocking this piece of myself, pretending it wasn't there because I'm the cold Aquarius my whole life. And, that's what it took for me to kind of own that whole side of myself, which is a huge piece of myself that I had been pushing down forever. And I really feel from the compatibility aspect too, I think this was also just like kind of amazing. In human design, you have defined centers and undefined centers, and those relate to your chakras. And my husband and I, when I read both of our charts, we have exactly opposite ones, defined and undefined. So essentially, like when we are together, we basically make up a whole person, is how I like to think of it.
Oh, that's lovely. So it's almost
Yes,
like he is your other half.
he
Yeah.
is. Yeah. And like astrologically, we both have completely opposite signs filled out on the chart. So like we truly are polar opposites. But I see it in the way that we're just two sides of the same coin. We're
Hmm.
always coming at things in completely opposite ways. Our perspective, our approach is totally different, but almost all the time we're talking about the same thing. We are on the same page once we can figure out how to get there.
Hmm.
um, which is, it's really beautiful. And I think human design and astrology really help to kind of paint that picture so I could have a visual of what was actually going on.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. I just love how all of these things are really starting to come to the forefront again. And, there's so many people that I come across that are going through some kind of spiritual awakening, or they're on a spiritual path, or they're wanting to find something. They're like a seeker of some kind. They want to find something that is better, that is more fulfilling. And I honestly, I get so excited. And I think that, yes, sometimes people will start out down this path and think, yeah, maybe it's not the right time, and they'll revert back and they'll go back to their corporate comfort. But then maybe in a little bit further down the line, maybe they'll come back and they'll be like, actually, maybe I should have just continued with that and explored that a little bit more. So it's super, super exciting to see like where people are going. But do you find, well, what is the biggest sort of challenge you find with people that you work with? What are the biggest sort of challenges that they're experiencing that are preventing them from being fulfilled or from leading a life and a career that is fulfilling?
Mm-hmm. I I typically, like I said, work with young professionals is kind of what I coin it. It's typically 20 to 30s, millennials, if you will. And most of them are people who have never thought about what they want before. They think they have, you think, how could I have gotten to the point where I'm 28 years old and never thought about what I want before? You're like, of course I have. But what I find is many of us, because I fall into that same category, is we were raised by parents who didn't want us to make the same mistakes as they did, the classic parenting model.
Mm-hmm.
And in this generation, a lot of that was you're going to go to college, you're going to be independent, you're going to get a good, stable job doing what you went to school for. And in my experience and in the people that I work with, that's what a lot of us did. And then you get to a point where even if you're doing well at this path that you've chosen, you're like, this just doesn't feel right. Like I'm kind of just going through the motions every day. This can't be what life is. This can't be what I just like worked for to get here. And I think that's the tricky thing is a lot of these people have never really turned within and don't even know where to start. They don't know how to even go about figuring out what they want and how to bring more of that into their lives.
Yeah. We're not really taught that though, are we? Whenever you think back to, and I know obviously you're over in the States, I'm in England, but whenever we think back even to the school years and whenever we were in education ourselves, like right from whenever we were children, we are really taught a societal standard, and the societal standard is also shaped by the expectation of our parents.
Mm-hmm.
And we have this society that doesn't really like us to be free-minded, free-willed, nomadic. It wants us to be almost, I want to use the term institutionalized, and I don't know if that is the right term, if it's too harsh, but we want conformity really as a
Get
society
in the
generally.
box.
Yeah, we don't want anybody to be different or to be spiritual or to be a traveler, or we want people to conform to the societal standard. I say we, I use that term loosely,
Yes.
but the general expectation is this thing about conforming. But actually, whenever we strip all of that back, it is really then that we start to, I suppose, uncover the real us. And then, I found that it really made me question the world in general and how we live our lives and the direction that we're going and how many, sheep there are. And I don't mean that as a rude term either, but, we do just generally accept the information that's fed to us by like governments and senior leaderships and people that are in power. And we don't really question things the same anymore. And it's the same when it comes to our own lives. It's just like, oh, well, it's expected. Oh, well, I don't want to disappoint them. Oh, well, I'd have to explain to my parents and it would be a really weird conversation. So I'll just continue doing what it is that I'm doing. And it'll be fine. I'm sure 10, 20 years, it'll be okay. But it's just so hard and I think so brave for people to step outside of that and spread their wings and be a bit different, be authentic. It's like
Exactly.
Brené Brown and her call to courage. I think, being authentic, there is so much power in that, but it's hard to break away from the norms. Whenever you're working with people, do you find that they're already at that stage where they're ready to break away, or where they're starting to think, I'm just a bit unhappy here. What are my options? Where do you sort of see them sitting?
Yeah, so I do kind of set the tone with my language on my website and the initial kickoff call, that you probably shouldn't even start down this path if you're not ready to go there. But I would say if you're in the position where you're Googling something that you would find my website in the first place, you're probably ready to go there. Whether you feel ready to go there or not, your soul is asking you to go there. So I think definitely whether you feel ready or not to go there, that fear and that resistance is absolutely going to come up as soon as you're trying to tell your brain, oh, we actually want to do something today that's not predictable and you don't know what's going to happen when we choose option B. Your brain's going to panic no matter if you want to do that or not. That's just how we're wired as human beings. Um, but yeah, I find that if you're wanting to even work with me, you're ready to go there, whether you mentally, emotionally, physically feel that way or not. Like one piece of you feels that way, and it's typically your soul is the thing kind of just pushing you to just do it. Because once you
Mhm.
open the can of worms of trying to, you know, understand yourself and know yourself and figure out why you have even gone down the path as far as you have in this way, um, you can't really unsee it once you see it. To
Mhm.
your point of once you started doing this work, you kind of started questioning everything. That's just a natural piece of what happens. So you do want to be ready before you start, because your whole life, whether you make changes to leave your job, you do not have to do that. You do not have to get divorced, get married, do any major life transitional changes throughout
Yeah.
this. It's about transforming yourself. But I will say, as a byproduct of that, throughout this process, typically something is going to transform in your life other than you.
Yeah.
You
No, I
do
would
have to be kind
agree.
of ready to experience that.
Yeah, I would agree. Like people come thinking, oh, well, I don't want, like I experience this where people will come and they'll not be ready to change their career. They're not ready to shut their business or walk away from whatever it is that they're doing, but they still want to work towards something that is better. But usually by the end of it, they're usually at that point where they're thinking, you know what, yes, this is the right thing. I don't need to be doing this business anymore. I don't want to be in the corporate world anymore. I don't want to be in charge anymore. I want to be doing something different. But it can take a while to get there. And some people still cling on, and there's no harm in that. It's just that maybe it's not the right time yet. And I do find that it's almost encouraging people, isn't it, to move at their own pace. Nobody is holding a gun to your head to say that you must do something, and usually the only person that's holding the gun to our heads is us. It's us. We're still thinking, well, what is everybody else going to be happy with? What is everybody else going to be pleased about? How can I make everybody else happy? And we think so much about that rather than actually putting ourselves first and thinking, okay, well, actually, what's going to make me happy? I know that my parents will be disappointed. My partner will maybe be disappointed if, I have to lose this big salary or whatever it might be. But we do put such an emphasis on what it's going to make other people think of us. But actually, whenever we get to the end of our life and we cross over, do we really want to be thinking, well, I led a life that made other people happy? Probably not. I wouldn't
Yeah.
want to think that.
Yeah. And I think, especially with millennials too, like with the people that I work with, that is a huge thread that's through every single client, myself included. Like people pleasing is what we were raised to do. we are all master people pleasers. I mean, everybody is to some extent, but I do feel like I feel like our generation really got hit with that pretty hard. And that's a huge piece that comes up when we go back and we try to figure out, you know, how did you get here? How can we kind of try to break these patterns, and what's the root that's causing them? When did you start doing this? Why did you start doing this? How can you kind of separate yourself from that version of yourself when you felt like that was necessary? Because that's not where you're at today.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not where you need to be at today if it is where you're at today.
Yeah, very, very true. So, what is the advice that you would give to anybody who is starting to think a little bit more about where they go next on their path when they're starting to feel that discontent coming up?
What I, what one of the things that kind of propelled me to think, oh, there is a way that I can make this work, is hearing the word ikigai. If anybody has heard that word, it's a Japanese word. Definitely Google it. It will give you a better explanation than I'm probably going to. But I think that would be a really great place to start for anybody, because it's understanding what you value, what you have to offer, what you're good at, your gifts and your talents, and then how you can actually bring that into the world and, you know, make it a vocation, basically. Make it actually impact lives and use it to help other people. And you don't necessarily, again, have to do that as a career. It's just starting to kind of have your brain spin in that type of way where you're even viewing that as a possibility. Oh, I do have gifts and talents, because I think it's really it can be challenging when we have these soft skills, if you will, where it's like, okay, I don't necessarily see me being extremely compassionate as a gift, but now I do, absolutely. But, you know, prior to going down that type of thought process, I didn't view that as a something that I could use to actually impact people's lives and help people with. So I would say that's a really good first step, even to just start thinking in this way. And then follow the breadcrumbs. Like, that is just so the key. Keep following, even when it feels resistant. Question why it feels resistant as it comes up. And just when you are following things that feel in alignment with where you want to be going, just trust that it's going to take you where you need to go.
Yeah, that is really, really good advice, actually. And it is just about that trust again.
It all comes back to the
Yeah.
trust, which is why so many people struggle with it, which is why so many people don't even go there. Once you get to a
Yeah.
certain point, a lot of people, it's, you know, easier to just look the other way and keep doing what you're doing because it's predictable. You know what's
Yeah.
going to come out of it. You feel like you have
Yeah.
more control, but
It's in your comfort zone, but that doesn't always mean that it's going to be happy. And as you experienced yourself, you know, you'll have that discomfort that starts to come in anyway, that's really trying to shift you and move you forward. One of the things actually that I always say to people about soul searching as well is how we perceive ourselves today is actually maybe not who we are, just that perception. You know, you said about the cold Aquarius, you know, we have these certain perceptions of ourselves, but because we're not really used to soul searching and really connecting with ourselves on a deeper level and connecting with our soul, whenever we start to do that, actually, you might uncover things about yourself that you didn't even know existed. You might find traits that actually have been masked by other things in society, but actually, maybe you never thought you were maternal, but you know, actually, in a few years from now, you could be thinking, oh my God, I'm so maternal. I'm so much more maternal than what I thought I was. And I do think that it's important to just keep an open mind that actually things change, how you perceive yourself will change, you will change. You know, there will be other things that come to the surface, and you know, just welcome it as the journey. And the journey is never linear. Like
no.
I'm yet to know anybody yet who's had like a linear journey, a linear life path, a linear career. Like there's twists and turns at every step. Sometimes there's a backward step, sometimes there's a turn, but just roll with it. Everything is taking you in the right direction.
Totally agree. Yeah. detaching from any identities is definitely a huge piece. I absolutely agree.
Yeah, great. Well, Claire, it has been absolutely amazing having you on the show. How can people find you?
Probably the best place is just my Instagram, which is Claire period Campagna, and then my website, which is just www.clairecampagna.com.
That's brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time today, and hopefully we'll have you on again in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you again for having me.
Thank you.